Have you thought about what you're getting your mom for Mother's Day? At Cozy Earth, they have a full line of apparel, PJs, shirts, socks, you name it, they have it. And if you buy any of their bedding, they have a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty, free shipping on orders over $50 or more. And our listeners get an exclusive discount of 21% off just by using our code INFOGO at checkout. And you can do that at cozyearth.com. Find the link and the code in the show notes. If you're laying mulch, bedding animals, covering seeds, or just want your property looking right, there's one name you need to know. Irwin Farms, Middle Georgia's #1 wheat straw provider. When it comes to quality wheat straw, it matters. Clean, consistent, and ready to work because they don't cut corners, they bale it. Whether you're a homeowner, gardener, farmer, or you're just getting your hands dirty for the first time, they've got you covered. You can find a link in the show notes. Just Google Middle Georgia's #1 wheat straw provider. Either way, you'll find Irwin Farms. Welcome to the podcast. I'm William.
And I'm Kat,
And that makes this Info on the Go.
feeding your curiosity wherever you go.
I know the Strait of Hormuz has been in the news, and it had me wondering, how vital is this? But what is the history of it? And that's the basis of this episode. So, with that being said, in the narrow waters of the Strait of Hormuz, modern maritime tensions play out like a contest. Low-level standoff, massive oil tankers, some of the largest ships on Earth move through the channel in tightly controlled shipping lanes, often shadowed by naval warships from multiple countries. And these vessels are not there by coincidence. They are part of a long-standing security presence designed to protect one of the most critical energy corridors in the world.
Above them, surveillance drones and reconnaissance aircraft quietly monitor movement, tracking every ship that enters or exits the Persian Gulf. The result is a highly watched and heavily guarded waterway where even routine passage carries strategic weight.
Yeah, and beneath this visible presence, well, radio communications between ships and naval forces add another layer of tension. Commercial vessels regularly report positions, request guidance, and coordinate movements under international maritime protocols. But those routine exchanges take place in a region where escalation risk is never fully absent. Hey, before we go any further, we're not going to get into what's going on in the world today. We're just talking about the history of the Strait of Hormuz.
Right. A single miscommunication, warning flare, or intercepted vessel can quickly raise alarm levels. This is why many commercial tankers travel under escort or in convoy arrangements during periods of heightened tension, with naval forces positioned nearby to deter interference or harassment. The system is designed to maintain stability, but it also reflects how fragile that stability can be.
At the heart of it all, this is an immediate and unavoidable reality. The global energy flow depends on this passage. A significant portion of the world's seaborne oil and a major share of liquefied natural gas, well, it exports from the Gulf region, and it has to move through this narrow channel every day. Any disruption, even temporary, well, as we've seen, can send shockwaves through global energy markets, affecting fuel prices, transportation costs, and inflation far beyond the region itself. This is not just a regional security issue, it is a structural pressure point in the global economy.
And so the question emerges almost naturally. As ships continue to pass under watchful eyes in one of the most heavily monitored waterways on Earth, how can one narrow waterway hold the global economy in balance?
Mm.
Why is it in such a chokehold?
Yeah, I mean, for real, we need gas prices to go down.
Ugh, yeah, that part. Okay. So the Strait of Hormuz is one of the most strategically important waterways in the world, not because of what surrounds it, on land, but because of how tightly it constrains movement at sea. It connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman, forming the only maritime exit for several of the world's largest oil producing states, including Iran, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, and the United Arab Emirates. Every ship carrying energy resources out of the Gulf must pass through this single maritime funnel, making it a critical artery in global trade.
And geographically, the strait is extremely narrow. At its tightest point, it is only about 21 miles wide, and the actual shipping lanes are even more constrained, organized into a traffic separation, kind of like inbound lanes and outbound lanes for vessels moving through the lanes just a few miles apart. That's pretty tight.
Indeed. This limited space forces large commercial tankers, some stretching over a quarter mile long, to navigate with precision in waters that feel more like a corridor than open sea. There's little margin for error and even less room for avoidance of tension if tensions or incidents arise.
Mm. This kind of geography creates what strategists often called choke point power, because there is no alternative sea route for large scale exports from the Persian Gulf. So, control or even disruption of this passage carries outsized influence. It is a rare example where physical geography alone dictates global economic vulnerability. So, the Strait of Hormuz is not just a line on a map, it is a structural constraint built into the world's energy system where the shape of the coastline effectively translates into geopolitical leverage.
Long before modern oil tankers and naval patrols, the waters around the Strait of Hormuz were already part of a vast and interconnected trading world shaped by the Persian Empire. To understand just how early this influence developed, it helps to anchor it in time at its height around 500 BCE. The Achaemenid Empire stretched across three continents, from the eastern Mediterranean to the edges of the Indian subcontinent. This vast imperial system depended not only on roads and overland routes, but also on maritime connections through the Persian Gulf.
Ports along these waters were not isolated outposts. They were integrated into large economic network that linked inland capitals to distant trading partners. Even at this early stage, control of coastal access and shipping lanes near what we now call the Strait of Hormuz was already tied to the movement of wealth, resources, and imperial power.
Under various dynasties, the Persian Gulf became essential gateways between Mesopotamia, the Indian subcontinent, East Africa, and the Arabian Peninsula. While land based trade routes like the Silk Road often get the most attention, maritime commerce through the Gulf was equally vital, especially for bulk goods and long distance exchange.
These early maritime systems fed into the wider Indian Ocean trade network, one of the most important commercial ecosystems in the ancient world. Ships carried spices, textiles, pearls, timber, precious metals, and ceramics across thousands of miles, connecting port cities that functioned as early global hubs. Goods often changed hands multiple times as they moved along the coastline, creating a layered economy where no single empire controlled everything, but several powers influenced key segments of the route.
Within this system, the Persian Gulf, and by extension the approaches near the Strait of Hormuz, served as a critical junction point. Control over ports and coastal access meant more than just military advantage. It meant access to taxation, tariffs, and the ability to regulate the flow of wealth moving between continents. Even without modern infrastructure, regional powers understood that whoever controlled maritime access points could shape economic outcomes far beyond their borders.
In this way, early Persian maritime influence demonstrates a pattern that would repeat across centuries. Geography, enabling economic leverage. Strait of Hormuz region was not yet a global energy choke point, but it was already a commercial gateway where control over passage translated directly into power, wealth, and influence across the ancient world.
By the early modern period, the waters around the Strait of Hormuz had become part of a much larger struggle between rising European maritime empires. In the 16th century, Portuguese naval forces pushed into the Indian Ocean with the goal of controlling key trade routes linking Europe, Africa, and Asia. Their strategy was not based on occupying vast territories inland, but on dominating strategic coastal choke points. The Strait of Hormuz quickly became one of their primary targets.
Yeah, and in 1515, the Portuguese captured the island of Hormuz at the mouth of the Persian Gulf and transformed it into a fortified naval and fortified it into a naval hub. From this position, they imposed control over who could enter and who could exit the Gulf, taxing trade and enforcing maritime dominance through a network of forts, armed ships, and coastal strongpoints. Their presence marked one of the first attempts by a European power to militarize and regulate long distance global trade at sea. And they turned this region into an early arena of empire competition.
However, Portuguese dominance did not last indefinitely. By the 17th century, regional powers,
Yeah, let's go with that.
most notably the Safavid Empire of Persia, with assistance from the English East India Company, which challenged and eventually expelled the Portuguese from Hormuz in 1622. This shifted control of the region once again, but it did not reduce its importance. Instead, it signaled a transition into a new phase of imperial rivalry.
Yeah, so by the 18th and 19th centuries, British influence gradually became the dominant maritime force in the Persian Gulf through naval superiority and a network of treaties with coastal rulers. Britain established itself as a primary enforcer of maritime order in the region, rather than direct territorial conquest of the strait. The British forced, the British focused on controlling piracy, securing trade routes, and protecting shipping lanes that were becoming increasingly important to global commerce.
Over time, the Strait of Hormuz evolved into a contested regional passage into a carefully monitored global trade artery. What had once been controlled through forts and cannons became governed by naval patrols, diplomacy, and imperial agreements. Yet the underlying reality remained unchanged. Whoever held influence over this narrow stretch of water held a decisive role in the movement of goods between East and West.
And then oil comes along and changes everything because the discovery of massive oil reserves beneath the Persian Gulf in the early 20th century fundamentally transformed the strategic importance of the Strait of Hormuz. What had once been a vital trade route for spices, textiles, and regional commerce, well, it suddenly became one of the most critical energy corridors on the planet. As oil exploration expanded across Iran, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, and the UAE, the Gulf region quickly emerged as the center of global petroleum production.
This shift coincided with the rapid expansion of the industrial age, particularly the rise of internal combustion engines, mechanized warfare, and globalized transportation systems. Oil was no longer a regional commodity, it became the lifeblood of modern economies. Factories, shipping fleets, airplanes, and later entire national infrastructures depended on a steady and uninterrupted supply. As a result, the geography of energy production became just as important as the geography of consumption.
Yeah, so the Strait of Hormuz naturally became the central exit point for this new energy economy. With no viable overland or alternative maritime route capable of handling the same volume, crude oil and liquefied natural gas, well, it had to pass through this narrow choke point before reaching global markets. And over time, the strait effectively evolved into an energy pipeline of the sea, where massive tankers replaced physical pipelines and maritime traffic carried the world's most important resources. Instead of manufactured goods, it carried oil.
As dependence on petroleum deepened throughout the 20th century and into the modern era, global economies became structurally tied to this single passage. Energy prices, industrial out transportation costs, and even political stability in distant regions began to respond to conditions in a narrow waterway, thousands of miles away. In this way, the Strait of Hormuz ceased to be just a regional geographic feature. It became an essential node in the architecture of the global economy, where any disruption carries consequences that extend far beyond the Gulf itself.
And I think before we get into the tanker war era, I said we should take a small break.
Sounds good to me.
Get you some water.
I do need to get some water.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Meet Savoristo. They have premium craft decaf and half calf coffee with bold, rich flavor. Made from high altitude, hand picked Arabica beans and naturally decaffeinated with water or sugarcane processes, and there's no harsh chemicals.
But if you think chocolate, caramel, citrus, even bourbon pecan and mint and mocha, it's small batch roasted, literally so good, customers call it the best decaf they've ever tried.
Better sleep, less anxiety, all the flavor. Use our code INFOGO to get 25% off at checkout at savorista.com. You can also find that link in the show notes. Hey, William, do you love craft beer?
Yes, I do.
If you're looking for the perfect gift for a beer lover or just want to show off your brewery pride, the Harpoon Shop has something you won't find anywhere else.
And here's something special just for our listeners. You can save 25% off just by using our code INFOGO at checkout. You can find that link in the show notes. All right, so now that we're back. So during the Iran-Iraq War, the Persian Gulf became the stage for one of the most dangerous phases of modern maritime conflict, the so-called tanker war. What began as a land-based war between Iran and Iraq gradually spilled into the sea, where both sides targeted commercial shipping in an attempt to weaken each other's economies and draw in international pressure. So the Strait of Hormuz and the surrounding Gulf waters became a contested zone where civilian shipping and military strategy collided.
Oil tankers, many of them carrying crude oil from Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and other Gulf states, were repeatedly struck by missiles, aircraft, and small, fast attack boats. Naval mines were also deployed in key shipping lanes, creating invisible hazards that were often only discovered after catastrophic damage had already occurred. One of the most infamous incidents came when the U.S. flag tanker Bridgerton struck a mine in 1987 during a convoy operation, highlighting just how vulnerable even heavy escorted vessels had become in these waters.
And as attacks intensified, international powers, mainly the United States, moved to secure shipping lanes. This led to large-scale naval escort operations, most notably Operation Earnest Will, where the U.S. Navy warships protected reflagged Kuwaiti tankers as they transitioned through the Gulf. These convoys, supported by surveillance aircraft and intelligence assets, marked one of the largest naval protection efforts since the Second World War. And this really reflected how seriously global powers viewed the threat to energy shipping.
The conflict exposed something that had not been fully understood before at such scale: how fragile global energy supply chains truly were, and the disruption of tanker traffic sent shockwaves through oil markets, insurance rates, and global economic planning. For the first time in the modern oil era, the world saw in real time that a regional maritime conflict could translate directly into global economic instability. The oil tanker war became the first modern proof that the Strait of Hormuz the tanker war became the first modern proof that the Strait of Hormuz region was not just strategically important, it was structurally essential to the functioning of the world economy.
And for the first time, the world realized something terrifying. This wasn't a regional war anymore, it was a global vulnerability. Because what had started as a conflict between two neighboring countries was now being measured in oil prices, insurance rates, shipping delays, and economic shockwaves that were felt thousands of miles away. The battlefield was no longer confined to borders or coastlines. It had expanded into the global economy itself. And from this moment on, the Strait of Hormuz was no longer viewed as just a strategic waterway. It was a pressure point the entire world had to watch.
Oof.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really know how important the Strait of Hormuz was, especially in today's economy. But, just going back over the history of it, it has been a strategic choke point throughout history,
Right. Not even just now, just forever.
especially now that we are dependent on oil.
Right. Insane. Sanctions and geopolitical standoffs have become a defining feature of modern tensions surrounding the Strait of Hormuz. Turning the waterway into more than just a physical choke point, it is now also an economic and political pressure valve. Over the past several decades, Western sanctions targeting Iran's energy exports and financial systems have repeatedly raised tensions in the region, while Iranian leaders have periodically responded with warnings that they could disrupt or even close the strait in retaliation. Although a full closure has never been sustained in modern times, even the threat of disruption has consistently been enough to influence global markets and diplomatic negotiations.
In practice, this uncertainty has led to a permanent international naval presence in and around the Gulf. Warships from the United States and allied nations, they routinely patrol the region, escort commercial vessels when risks are high, and monitor maritime traffic through surveillance systems, aircraft, and naval intelligence networks. This ongoing deployment is not temporary. It has become a structural feature of the region's security environment, reflecting the fact that uninterrupted flow through the strait it's considered essential to global energy stability.
At the time, the economic consequences of instability are immediate and measurable. Maritime insurance markets respond almost instantly to escalation in the region, with war risk premiums rising sharply during periods of tension. In recent years, insurance costs for vessels transitioning the strait have spiked dramatically, and in some cases, insurers have withdrawn or restricted coverage altogether when risks were deemed too high. Because is mandatory for commercial shipping, these shifts directly affect whether vessels sail at all, effectively slowing or rerouting global trade even without formal blockades.
As a result, the Strait of Hormuz has evolved into something larger than a geographic passage. It has become a global tension meter. When diplomacy improves, insurance rates fall, naval alerts ease, and shipping resumes normal flow. When tensions rise, well, the opposite happens almost immediately because warships increase presence, commercial operations, they start to hesitate, and global energy markets react within hours. In this way, the strait doesn't just reflect geopolitical conflict, it amplifies it, translating political friction into economic consequence on a global scale.
Wild.
Yeah, I mean, the Strait of Hormuz is extremely important if we haven't hit that home yet,
Extremely to everybody's way of life. You know,
especially if you drive a car or use oil or anything like that.
in any kind of capacity, not to mention shipping. Roughly one fifth of the world's seaborne oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz, making it one of the most important energy choke points on the planet. Every day, massive crude oil tankers and liquefied natural gas carriers leave key producing states in the Persian Gulf and funnel into this narrow passage before reaching markets in Asia, Europe, and beyond. This includes exports from some of the world's largest producers, such as Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait. Because there is no practical alternative sea route for most of this volume, the strait functions as an unavoidable gateway in the global energy system.
Beyond oil, liquefied gas shipments have also increased the strategic importance of the region as countries have expanded their reliance on natural gas for electricity generation and industrial use. Liquefied natural gas cargoes, it's moving through the strait. It has become just as critical as crude oil shipments. This means that the waterway is no longer just central to oil markets, it's embedded in the broader structure of global energy dependence.
The economic implications of any disruption are immediate and far reaching. Even brief interruptions in shipping can trigger sharp increases in global fuel prices, affecting everything from gasoline at the pump to the cost of aviation fuel and freight transport. Because energy is a foundational input in nearly every sector of the modern economy, these price shocks quickly rippled outward, contributing to inflation and rising costs for goods and services worldwide. Supply chains, already tightly optimized for efficiency, can also experience delays in rerouting when shipping risk increases or insurance costs surge.
So, perhaps most striking is how sensitive global markets are to even the perception of instability. In the modern financial system, oil prices often react not only to physical disruptions, but also to headlines, rumors, or political statements suggesting potential interference with shipping in the region. Traders, insurers, and governments alike, well, they all respond in real time to perceived risk. So this all means that the Strait of Hormuz, it can be influenced not just by what actually happens there, but also what might happen. And this way functions as a consistent pressure point in the global economy, where uncertainty alone is enough to move markets almost instantly.
The modern balance surrounding the Strait of Hormuz is shaped by two competing strategies: military deterrence and diplomatic containment. On one hand, powerful naval forces maintain a visible and continuous presence in the region, signaling that any attempt to disrupt shipping would be met with an immediate and coordinated response. This deterrence is not just symbolic, it's operational. Built on surveillance networks, rapid deployment capabilities, and long standing defense agreements between global and regional powers. The goal is not to eliminate tension, but to prevent it from escalating into full disruption of one of the world's most important energy corridors.
And on the other hand, diplomacy remains a constant but fragile layer of containment. International negotiations, sanction agreements, and regional security dialogue, well, it all aims to reduce the likelihood of escalation, even as an underlying political rivals persist. These efforts often operate in cycles, moments of reduced tension followed by renewed friction, reflecting how deeply embedded the Strait of Hormuz is in broader geopolitical disputes. Neither military presence nor diplomacy fully resolve the underlying vulnerability. Instead, they just manage it, keeping the system functioning under continuous pressure.
And at the same time, a slow but important shift is underway: the global energy transition. As renewable energy sources expand and some economies reduce their dependence on imported fossil fuels, the long term strategic weight of oil checkpoints like the Strait of Hormuz may gradually change. However, this transition is uneven and incomplete. For now, global demand for oil and liquefied natural gas remains high, meaning the strait continues to sit at the center of the world's energy architecture. The dependency has not disappeared, it has only begun to evolve.
In the end, the Strait of Hormuz stands as a striking reminder of how geography and global systems intersect. It is a place so small it barely appears on a map at full scale, yet it reaches into fuel prices, political decisions, military deployments, and everyday economic life across the world. It is a corridor that carries far more than ships, it carries stability itself. And that is why one final thought lingers as the tankers continue to pass through its waters.
At the beginning of this story, we watched ships move carefully through a narrow stretch of water, monitored, guarded, and tense. And now we understand why. Sometimes the most important place in the world isn't a capital city, it's just a corridor.
So, how is it being monitored today? And how are things different than what we talked about? Today you have cyber warfare and maritime tracking systems. Modern shipping, well, it relies on GPS and AIS, which is automatic identification system, and also satellite tracking. Vulnerabilities in digital navigation systems, you have jamming, spoofing, and cyber interference risk. So, how a silent war can disrupt physical shipping without a single shot fired? Well, the role of naval intelligence and real time monitoring.
Then you also have piracy versus state conflict distinction, right? The difference between rogue piracy attacks and a state backed naval harassment, how legal ambiguity and international waters complicates the response, and proximity forces operating in the region, right? Because everybody is right there.
Yeah, everybody's right there.
Ready. Okay. I don't know what they're ready for just yet, but they're ready for something all
They're
the time.
definitely ready for something.
there is rules of engagement for international navies in contested waters.
And then you also have environmental risk in the Strait of Hormuz because you have dense tanker traffic, which increases collision risk, oil spill scenarios in a confined marine ecosystem. This can leave long-term ecological impact on the Gulf waters, coastal economies and fisheries. Well, if that ever happened, it would put them at risk. Just one accident can trigger both an environmental and a geopolitical crisis
At
all
the
at
same
once.
time.
Yeah, at the same time. Thank you. But yeah, the Strait of Hormuz, I mean, it is a very vital part
Mhm.
of the global economy.
Right. Who knew why everybody wanted it so bad?
Well, or to protect it, I guess. I mean, here's the thing. This show is not about being political. We just thought we would bring why the Strait of Hormuz is actually important in today's conversations.
Right. Right. Why is it relevant?
Yeah. And not only that, the history of it, like it has a very rich, deep history, from goods to, well, petroleum.
Right. All the way across the board and all throughout history too. It's not just now, it's been the almost the entire time it's been alive too.
Yeah, definitely have had some kind of conflict going on around it and control over it.
Hmm.
If you would like to support this podcast, tell a friend and help get the word out.
If you'd like to help us keep the show going, you can do so at Patreon. You can find that link in the show notes.
Kat and I want to say thank you for listening.
Always, whether you've been with us from the very beginning or just tuning in. Thank you.
Yep. Tell a friend if you're enjoying the show. You can also join the Facebook group at Info on the Go,
And over there, you can share with us your show ideas.
or join the conversation or ask a question.
No matter what you do, though, please follow us wherever you're listening to this podcast.
You can also send us a text using the link in the show notes or leave a review.
It really does help others find us. You can also email us at,
Info on the Go podcast at gmail.com.
and you can also find that link in the show notes. Till next time.
Stay curious.
William, I know how you love matcha tea with coconut milk.
Yeah, it's clean energy without a crash.
Then you'll love Mantra Matcha. They offer super premium ceremonial matcha and 6 superfood infused flavors made from the finest, youngest tea leaves for a naturally sweet, ultra smooth taste.
With each flavor, it's infused with powerful superfoods like cacao, ginger, and goji berries. And they also have those classic favorites like banana cacao, strawberry lemon, cinnamon goji berry, plus superfood berry, ginger beet, and rosehip dragon fruit. It's organic, non GMO, gluten free with 0 grams of sugar. You can enjoy it like me, or maybe hot or in a smoothie like Cat. Every purchase helps provide meals to kids through No Kid Hungry.
It's at mantramatcha.com. Get 15% off using our code INFOGO at checkout. Both links are in the show notes.
Hey, everybody, we want to tell you about strong coffee. Every morning it starts with a choice. You can settle for just coffee, or you can rise up with strong coffee. And it's the world's strongest cup of joe. Strong isn't just a drink, it's a movement. It stands for striving to reach our natural greatness.
It's born from one simple need: to be better. They rebuilt coffee from the ground up, infusing organic coffee with collagen, protein, nootropics, and functional ingredients that fuel your body and sharpen your mind. No crash, no compromises, just clean energy, focus, and flavor that fires you up.
Yeah, so whether you're chasing kids, chasing goals, or chasing greatness, don't just do it with coffee, do it with strong coffee. And our listeners can save 20% off just by using our code INFOGO at checkout. Hey, if you're looking for your favorite band or sports team or TV show, check out Old Glory. They've been in operation since 1969 and they have over 300,000 items. They have from the Beatles all the way to Metallica, NFL, NBA. It really doesn't matter what you're looking for. They have tees, hoodies, hats, gifts, everything a true fan could ever want. And it's family owned and operated. They have fast shipping, free standard delivery on every order. And you know what? Our listeners get a 15% off at checkout using our code INFOGO. You can find the link in the show notes.